welcome to What's Life Without Cricket. This is a very very informal, topical, conversational show which Anand and I have been wanting to do for a bit. It's essentially connecting with all our friends, and talking about the game we love. Right now, unfortunately, we are not able to connect physically, and somewhere, at least I can speak for myself, is I really miss talking about cricket. Really miss talking about cricket, and luckily for me, there's the IPL on. It's not my favorite format at all, but something's better than nothing. Beggars can't be choosers. So I get my fix from there, but I have a long list of people, Anand, and I have got a list of people whom we'd like to talk to about stuff. And so this is the first episode of that. And, we thought that you would be a great guy to get the show on the road, so to speak. So we'll go around a few things, with your recent experiences, talk about the books you worked on, talk a little bit about the IPL as well. Any great anecdotes around the Australia series, that great series for India. So that's what we want to do. Anand, if you want to jump in and say a few words, and then I'll kick it off essentially.
Yeah, I think what you said about missing talking cricket is major. I think for all of us, the fact that we're not being able to meet while we are not yet in lockdown in Bangalore, the restrictions. I think people are putting restrictions in place themselves. People are very concerned about meeting in groups. Even with my friends, I've met, one odd person here and there, that too living close by. So it is definitely not like before. Let's see how much of that spirit we can recreate on online and through Zoom.
Absolutely. So Bharat, the toss version of this show is a question which we are going to ask everybody to kick it off, and that is, what would your life be without cricket in it?
Without wanting to sound too dramatic, but at the risk of doing so, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead without cricket. I laugh about it now, but I think Anand knows about this a little more than you do. I was in a bad space in my life maybe 15 years ago, and I was doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing at that young age or at any age. But cricket was the only thing which kept me grounded, which kind of kept me honest, even though I wasn't playing it at that point, but just following it and all that. And here I am, supposedly part of the cricket industry, and I have been for quite a while now. I've aged in cricket. So yeah, but without it, the way I was going, without getting into too many gory details, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be around here.
Sure, and Bharat, I hadn't thought about this at all, but it is so, your reply is such an honest reply, because that was the one, cricket was the one thing which, got you back on track, and, very happily so, right? We are all involved in sport. I worked for Nike for 10, 11 years. And it was a walk in the park, to be honest, because you watch matches for a living, and then you go and give your gyan internally about sport. So you've got to be extremely grateful about what this game has given us, and the joy which it continues to give us. And one of those huge peaks of joy was the India tour to Australia. I remember I would be up before the first ball was bowled, and my entire body clock had turned around a little bit. I think everybody's had, right? Especially the guys in India. So, and you wrote beautifully about the Siraj episode. I think it was straight from the heart. It did Siraj some rightful credit, because here's a young man. Here's a young Indian man. It was very symbolic of young India, I thought. Give us an insight into, when it happened. What did you go through, and I'm sure you would have said, did that just happen? And from there to actually penning it down, can Can you take us through that passage?
Yeah, for sure, Jatin. And you guys know me. I'm not a very emotional person. Like this is me. I'm like just always seem to be happy for some reason. But it was a strange day, really, because we'd seen some really good cricket till that point already. And I remember very vividly that was also around the time that there was all this discussion about will India go to Brisbane for the fourth test or not, and there was a lot of drama. I was, of course, adding fuel to the fire because I knew I couldn't go to Brisbane, so I was trying my level best to keep that fourth test in Sydney. The players were just walking off the field, but I just noticed, like you're always looking at. Anand will tell you, especially when guys are leaving and guys are coming onto the field, that's when some drama could happen. It rarely happens, but I had my binoculars on. I was just checking what is happening, and suddenly I saw Siraj walk up to the umpires, and then a couple of senior players came to his aid, and he kept pointing in the direction of the stands where he had been abused from, and you immediately knew it was crowd trouble. You immediately knew something had been said or something had been thrown or something had happened. And here was, like you said, a young Indian cricketer who already, had been a really testing tour for him. He lost his father pretty much 2 or 3 days into the tour while he was in quarantine. He couldn't even meet a lot of the other players. They couldn't go to his room. So after all that, for him to have on that first evening, or the second evening of the match, to have brought it to the senior players' notice, told you two things. A, that, like you said, confident India, the new India, they don't take a backward step. And also how united the team was. They had given all the young players this freedom that if you do hear something, if you do experience something, you can be open to come and tell us about it, which I thought was just special. Honestly, on that evening, you just trying to guess what had happened. Of course, I tried calling a few people in the team, but nobody was picking up the call. And you could see that the security got involved, and then David Boone was called to the Indian dressing room, and then the chief security officer came in, and the cops came in, and they looked like they were interviewing 4 or 5 people. Dressed very colorfully, and that's where it ended. It was funny because at the same time that was happening, Nick Hockley, the Cricket Australia acting CEO, was having a meeting with the Indian medical staff, and you could make out that was about the whole Brisbane thing. So, and nobody had noticed it, Jatin, and I was like, this is going to be a long night. So I just called all the Aussie journalists and said, see, there's lots of things happening, so that I could ruin everyone's night. Yeah. So it was a dramatic evening, but at that point you felt like, it's happened, so we'll see how we report on it. And incidentally, that evening when I went back to my Airbnb, so I was staying in an apartment in Potts Point, not too far from the Sydney Harbour. And it was one of those key things which opens the main gate to enter the apartment complex. And I had a lot of things in my hand. I think I had some takeaway food as well. So I was just trying to get myself in. I had thrown my backpack, and I was dressed as I normally am. But then this couple just walked out, and so because I had a lot of these things, and the gate opened, the door opened, I thought I can walk in, and then they kind of stopped me and they said, no, Uber Eats guys have to wait outside. And even at that point I was like, I made a joke about it. I said, I wonder why you would say that. I can pass off as one, right? I was just being my silly self. And then anyway, I got myself upstairs, did my thing, and I was doing radio commentary throughout that series for SEN. And I remember being on air the next morning during the first session, and I remember noticing that Mohammad Siraj was fielding on the other side of the ground, other end of the ground, for at least the first hour. And I noticed him then going back into that position. And I said, wow, that's a great sign. That it also tells you a lot about this youngster, that he's confident enough, brave enough, courageous enough to go back to that position where he was abused. And then the cricket got really interesting. I remember Cameron Green started hitting a big lot of sixes. Australia was getting very excited about it. And then it just happened. And then, suddenly play was stopped. And you knew immediately what had happened. And again, right, most cricketers, there have been so many Indian cricketers and overseas cricketers who've gone to Australia, copped a lot of abuse. but rarely have they stop play. Rarely have they said like, that's it, enough is enough. I'm not like, this is just a game of cricket. You can just pause it. And it told you a lot about that, like Mohammad Siraj and his confidence. And later on, a lot of other Indian cricketers I spoke to said he didn't really catch what they were saying on day one, but by day two or the next day, he knew what they were saying and why it was affecting him as well. So once that happened, I just it just felt very helpless sitting in that press box. Like, it felt like it shouldn't be happening, right? We are in 2020 or 2021, and this was just before the tea break. And in fact, I was just about to go on air after that, and I don't know what happened. And I just turned into this person, like, where I just got really emotional. I spoke about how it feels to be at the receiving end, of abuse. And yeah, I mean, when you are dark skinned in anywhere, like, it's India has no. India can be as racist a country as any other country, but it's just that when you are overseas and constantly people say things to you, you can look at it different in many ways, right? And I almost felt guilty at that point because I had made it into like a joke over the years. Every time people said something, called me a Deliveroo guy or something, I would laugh about it because I can deal with it. But that does not mean that I should normalize it. And all these thoughts started coming to my head, and I spoke about it on air while the match was on. Then the SEN guys called me back during the tea break, and they said, like, the next 10 minutes are yours, say whatever you want.
Wow.
And I just my voice started quivering, and I started talking about the times that, I had experienced. My second day in Australia ever in 2014, I walked into a pub in Phillip Hughes' hometown, and the first thing someone said was like, mate, like, are you a terrorist? Do you have a bomb in your bag? And I made a joke about it, and and ever since I've told a lot of people, Anand is sick and tired of listening to it, about how I responded. I called him a bomber, and he brought me a beer and all that. But then after seeing what happened to Siraj, I was like, no, I've gone about it the wrong way. It doesn't mean that you get into a quarrel with people or abuse back, but pulling them up and at least giving them a chance to understand why it affects you is so important. And then also finding or trying to figure out, is it coming from malice or is it just coming from ignorance? And these are things that you never think about. Of course, and I also wanted to make sure that I don't form any link between that and Black Lives Matter. That's a seriously different issue and maybe a much more important issue. But still, it doesn't make this okay or lessens the impact it has on people. And I spoke about it, and then, like you said, I wrote that piece where I said that Siraj is a hero, right? Every time I did what I did, I was wrong. I should have done what Siraj did, pull people up and educate them if you can. And if you still can't get through to them, then pull them up further, expose them. And I think he taught all of us a lesson. I'm sure all of us at various levels. You played so much cricket overseas. Anand has toured overseas so much over the years. I'm sure you copped it. But yeah, it was I think a significant moment, not just for cricket, but for Indians as well around the world.
Yeah. And it can happen in various ways. I would get asked in England, why do you speak English so well? So I'm sure all of us have had this asked to us. But yeah, and do you think that brought the Indian team closer?
I definitely think so. And, you could see it during that test match. I was I know India went on to the Gabba and won that famous test and won the series. But for me, the most incredible period of cricket I've ever covered is when Ashwin and Vihari batted. One couldn't walk, one couldn't sit, nobody could run. It was just watching two 70-year-olds play club cricket in Bombay somewhere, right? There was no running between the wickets. And then one of them had that the thigh pad behind their back. They were romantically exchanging it at the end of each over. I'd never seen cricket like that. It was, I don't think any of us have. Yes, that too in a test match. And you could see the fire which was there in that Indian camp from the beginning. They wanted to make a difference on this tour because there had been so much talk about, you won here last time, but that was without Warner and Smith. And a lot of that was coming from India, more than from Australia, really. Right. So you could see that they wanted to make a point, but then that incident really seemed to, it almost like, I'm not saying they went looking for it, but in many ways, I think set up the rest of the series for them.
Right.
And you could see it on the last day in Sydney.
Sure.
Now, let's move slightly away from Australia, because you had some very interesting experiences in England during the World Cup as well, when you did the World Cup on wheels. I don't think any other journalist has covered a whole tournament like that. So what was the camper van life like? I know you've spoken about this before, but it's been a while since we have.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Thank you for asking me about it. It does feel like a long time ago. It was a very unique experience. It's not like you don't go camping in India. Let's face it. I mean, you're someone who climbs mountains and all that. I'd never done that in Bombay. Even though I'm from Ghatkopar. There you go. First plug for Ghatkopar on the show. It came about because Gaurav Joshi and I said, we need to do something different. We need to find a way to stay away from other journalists. That was one of the reasons we did it. But and he had no experience either. The funniest thing was we were supposed to share the driving. And on day one, Gav has grown up in Australia driving cars on these massive roads. I grew up in Ghatkopar, so I knew how to maneuver any kind of vehicle anywhere. So he drove on day one and he said that I can't do this anymore. And I loved it because I love driving, as you know. So I just got behind the wheel. It was interesting. It allowed us to see so many other parts of England than you get to while you're doing a cricket tour. And there were times when, and it helped that it was a World Cup and I was doing Australia, he was doing India mainly. So there were gaps that we could fill up, and we went to the Lake District when we thought that we could do with some romance. I remember Gav got very crabby in between when he couldn't see the beach. So I drove him to the southern end of the country so that he could see the sea. So those experiences were good, but also it let us, so we also did a lot of things like go and meet Joe Root's grandfather, and we were invited to Joss Butler's mother's house for tea. And I think it had a lot to do with this whole camper van thing. People were like, what, really? Two nutcases in a camper van driving around the country. People hadn't heard about it before, so I thought that uniqueness helped. But it was fun. I think I recommend it to a lot of people in India who, not just on cricket tours, but even otherwise, it's something you should experience. Let's face it, the only thing I've heard about it that people say, but you have to stay in campgrounds and use public toilets. But we know all about it, right?
Yeah.
We are comfortable using public toilets. Yeah. And the only thing though used to be that generally the people you would find in these campsites in the UK are the 60 and above group. And every morning when I would come out of the shower and dry my hair, a lot of old white men got the shock of their lives. They were like, oh, ye kaun aa gaya? And then apart from that, I think it was really good. And of course, sleeping in that little cabin above the cockpit of the vehicle was interesting at times, but neither Gav nor I are the naughty sorts, so we didn't have to worry about privacy at all.
Sure. Bharat, have you been following the IPL? What are your thoughts on the young Indian players? Which are the young Indian players which have excited you so far in the first week and a little bit of the IPL this year?
Yeah, I think I watched a little bit of Sakaria, who, I like a lot of bowlers in today's generation just come with a lot of variety, right? Like back when I was growing up, the only variety I ever saw was Venkatesh Prasad's back of the hand slow ball, which at that point was you'd all be amazed by it. Like, how does he pull it off? No batsman seems to be able to pick it up, especially the Pakistanis. But he just seems to have great temperament. But I'll tell you who I've been really happy for is Harshal Patel, who's not young really, but he's been around for so long, and he would have those 2 matches in every IPL season where you think that this guy has something about him, right? He's got that fire, he's got a great attitude. But the way he started, finally he seems to have found a role that suits him. He seems to have found a niche. So I've been really happy for him, and it's always good when you see a lot of young bowlers make a mark at the start of the tournament. Because with India now, you just expect like a lot of explosive batsmen will come through, and maybe we will see the likes of Samad and those guys really perform as the tournament goes on. But for now, those are the names that have really popped up. I will be honest, I don't watch too much of it. It starts at 11:30 p.m.
So,
and now I have a puppy to take care of as well, so no responsibility.
I also think Meriwala will bowl well. I hope they give him a few games, because both Sakaria and Meriwala, I've watched them a lot on the domestic circuit. They're just those typical, I don't know, Saurashtra and Gujarat keep getting these left-arm spinners or left-arm seamers, right? It's if you go back into history, there are tons of them. And they always have what we call in Bombay cricket, they have the tappa, and Meriwala, I think, was a little bit flustered yesterday, but he's a tough cookie. I'm looking forward to how he comes back in the next couple of games. Anand, anything?
Yeah, I actually remember writing on Meriwala. He did really well in a Ranji Trophy match a few years ago at the Wankhede. And Munaf Patel, I spoke to him for that story, and he's done a lot of work with Meriwala. But of course, the one thing that excited a lot of people in the Bombay press box when he did play was his name. Everybody kept going Lukman. But but I think he had, like, you're right about the tappa. It just like kisses the surface. It got that nice zip of the surface. So hopefully he'll do well.
And both these guys, they've been their captains' go-to men. I've noticed that when Gujarat and Saurashtra are in a tough spot and say Unadkat is not playing, Sakaria is the guy they go to, to get them out of a hole. Meriwala is the guy they go to in white ball cricket to get them out of that hole. So that tells you a lot about the character of the guys. I'm really, really looking forward to young Indian bowlers, coming in. So it's going to be an interesting tournament.
Yeah, and speaking of being the go-to man for the captain, Bharat has a book out on Suresh Raina. He hasn't played for a while, and so we were not very sure what it would be like for him getting back into the IPL. But somehow when he wears that yellow jersey and plays for CSK, he seems to get going straight away. He got into his groove immediately. You've also done a book on Dhoni, obviously, Bharat. That's a very popular book and that's done very well. What was the experience like doing your second one with Raina?
Yeah, it was very, very, very different, Anand, because the Dhoni book was done without ever interviewing him. Like, it was just him giving me access to players, the people close to him, which thankfully were just very few. But with Suresh Raina, it's his book. It's written by me in a way. But the challenge really was the fact that his management group came to me via Penguin saying they wanted a self-help kind of book. And initially I had to convince them that, like, just a self-help book with Suresh Raina and Bharat Sundaresan, I wouldn't go looking for it, to be honest. But so we made it more like a memoir of his life and the lessons he's learned, and like I'm sure Jatin has through his cricketing journey, and like we have through our slightly different cricket journeys. And I thought that would make for a much better reading, but there are more stories in there, and that he talks about like the various aspects of it. It is an interesting story. It is a small town story. His hostel life was not easy, so he's spoken a lot about that. And the key guys from Dravid and Tendulkar and Dhoni, who really played a big role in his life and his family life as well. And I thought that would be at least easier for people to relate with when, like, you present a few lessons that you've got. And like, people maybe pick it up and so there's some life philosophy thrown in there through Suresh Raina by Bharat Sundaresan as well, I will be honest. But it was different because you had to speak to the cricketer a lot. So, and I was very busy as well throughout the whole period. So I think I was more a celebrity than he was. At times, like, he would complain to his manager that Bharat bhai ko main jab bhi call karta hu, umpiring kar raha hai, ya match commentary kar raha hai, ya match cover kar raha hai, mera se baat hi nahi kar raha hai. So yeah, though I did bitch about him not being very receptive to my phone calls. Honestly, it was the other way around, but somehow we found enough time and I got enough out of him to put the book out. And like it seems to be the case with whenever I write a book, it seems to I seem to push the deadline a lot, which I did. And Radhika, who we all know really well, somehow stays patient with me. And yeah, I finished it off sort of in time, and I think it comes out in 3 weeks' time.
Right. Speaking of Raina and its comeback of sorts, right? Because after missing the last season, I was really excited / emotional to see Harbhajan back after 2 years, and the first ball just landed, where it's meant to land. I thought that was something fascinating, and it wouldn't have been like you would have been practicing for hours, but it's that entire Gladwell kind of principle, right? The 10,000 hours. And I remember Harbhajan telling me that he used to bowl for 6 or 7 hours every day at the ground behind his house. So I think once that's in your muscle memory, you just need that the recreation of the atmosphere and the pressure and everything, and things just fall into place. So I was really excited about Harbhajan. I'd like to ask you, Bharat, what is your view on young captains this year in the IPL? It's a little bit of a left field kind of piece which we are seeing from a lot of the teams. So what are your views on that? I'd love to know Anand's views on it as well.
Firstly, I'm not surprised that Rishabh Pant was just automatically handed the captaincy once they realized that Shreyas Iyer wasn't fit or won't be available for at least the first half of the IPL. There was some talk that Ashwin might get the go, which would also have been a good pick. But just the last few months Rishabh Pant has had, and it's not just. I think people don't give enough credit to him for. The cricketing smarts he has. A lot of people just randomly dismiss him off, even now as a maverick. I thought one of the best moments for me from that India-England series was when one of the commentators asked Rishabh Pant after the game, saying, the crowd seems very entertained, and Rishabh Pant very nonchalantly said, well, I'm just here to win games for my country if the crowd gets entertained. And that's a sign of a great entertainer, right? If someone comes up to you and says that, Jatin, I want to entertain you. Yeah, you know immediately that this guy's a put on. But there's just something about him. And I wasn't always a Rishabh Pant fan, but it really changed after this tour. And I remember watching him in the nets at the SCG. I had one exclusive net session just for myself, where the evening before he came and played that innings, he was talking to himself because he'd broken his elbow or hurt his forearm, and he kept telling himself, "Tujhe kuch nahi hua, chal, tujhe kuch nahi hua," and he was really pepping himself up, and he was telling the throwdown guys, "No, bowl bouncers at me, bowl bouncers, don't be scared, you won't hurt me." And it was interesting because this is while the match was still going on. So I kind of seen them sneak out. So I also snuck out and I was there. And they still wanted to know what this the score was. And there was this big video screen where I was standing behind the net. So after every time they heard a crowd noise, they would look at me, and then I had to look at the screen and I would signal 4 or 2 or 6 or dot ball. So it was an interesting evening. But he just every knock he's played has been different in Test cricket and in one-day cricket as well. He's come in different situations, and just that game awareness is amazing, really. So I was not surprised that he was given the captaincy. And Sanju Samson, honestly, I haven't seen him captain much, so I was honestly surprised when I learned that they'd given him the captaincy, because Rajasthan have always had a thing for slightly experienced overseas captains, but they also do things differently as well. So maybe Anand can tell you much more about Sanju Samson, the captain.
Yeah.
No, I think the interesting thing is the realization finally in India that T20 cricket is not just a 20-over version of the 50-over game. For a long time, we were just playing it as a shorter one-day international kind of thing. But the dynamics of T20 cricket are so different, and other countries, incredibly, it's very surprising having the best T20 league, the most competitive T20 league in the world, and India was still playing catch-up when it came to T20 tactics, when it came to T20 selection, when it came to T20 approach. So I think in that sense, getting younger guys like Rishabh, Sanju to lead teams will... They don't come with that baggage of having played 200 one-day internationals. So they're not thinking from a 50-over perspective. They do actually treat every ball as though it's an event. They do actually believe that the game can turn in 1 over or even in half an over, which is not something that people who played the longer format for a long duration of time. Their attitude and approach is slightly different. You can see that even the best players are still looking to take some time to get their eye in, and then trying to pace an innings and go take it deep into the innings. Whereas these guys are a little different. I mean, they know that every single ball matters, and they play the game like that.
I saw both of them actually, both wicket keepers, right, with their gloves over their hand, over their face, lost in thought, because that they had that captain's expression on them, कि ये ठीक है, ये over में ठीक है, लेकिन next over क्या होगा, So I saw them lost in thought, and I just loved that visual, because I know for sure that it's going to improve their core competency, which is their batting, such a lot. So next time when Rishabh Pant is in a test match against Australia, and when he's got to shepherd the tail, he will be a different player altogether, because he knows what responsibility is. He would have been through the fire of failure and defeats and wins as captain. Yesterday or day before, when Delhi were playing, I noticed, Meriwala reacted late to a ball at short third, or maybe it was short fine leg. And the commentators had a go at him. Everybody had a go at him. But he just turned around to him and said, "ठीक है, होता है यार, to focus कर next ball." So that's the kind of vibe which is being built up, and this is the kind of atmosphere which successful teams have essentially. And Ricky, as you know, is a great coach, and a lot of thought would have gone into it. I also felt that they are missing Shreyas Iyer as captain, because even though he's led them for a season and a half, he's still got a grasp of that team. You sometimes with a new captain, players are looking around. Who do I look to? I think I saw a bit of that, but hopefully Rishabh will settle into this role. I think it's great for Indian cricket, basically, because that you have a young national team, and if 3 or 4 of them are captains in that team, then you're building the right pipeline for the post Kohli and the Sharma era. And if all 4 of them get along well, then you have the core of a strong side. Do you think that India's win in Australia and India's win against England at home has, and this is a question for both of y'all, has changed the world order in cricket?
Yeah. Before we come to that, you're so right about having multiple leaders out there, and that was for me the most pleasing sight from watching India play in the Test series in Australia. Was initially you could see that Bumrah was the bowling captain. It was so clear that Bumrah was in the year of every young fast bowler, or every fast bowler who played alongside him in the early half. But then Siraj made his debut in the second test, but by the third test, he was in Navdeep Saini's year. He was putting an arm around him, and despite everything that he had to go through during that test, and of course by the fourth test, he was the senior most bowler with Shardul and T. Natarajan playing. Yeah. So there was a lot of that happening. Ashwin, I thought really, I remember him copying a lot of criticism for saying, "I'm a leader without a title" a few years ago, but he was a leader without a title on this tour, because you could see he was at mid-on, mid-off, fighting injury at times, but he was helping Rahane and the bowlers set fields. It was a great sign. And Rishabh Pant, even though he wasn't captain or anywhere close to being that during that Australia tour, was amazing from behind the stumps, and we saw a lot of that during the England series as well. You can look at it as just being like chatter, and I get very annoyed when people just listen to him and laugh about him singing a Spider-Man song. There's a lot of subtle messages that get passed on as well, which I think is a great sign. But has it changed the world order? People in Australia certainly believe it has. Every tour I went on, Jatin and Anand, after that tour was like, oh, finally, India has realized the power of having 1.3 billion plus people. And how do you stop them now? Once that they've realized it. And it's... we don't know whether the World Test Championship final will happen in England, and whether India will be allowed to travel. If that does happen, I know that I've heard the team management talk about that being their the big moment from, say, even during that New Zealand tour last year when they lost both tests. So they've had their eye on it, but it just tells you that we heard a lot about power and numbers, but it's seriously coming through now. Like there's just so many guys that you can pick from, and now after this IPL there'll be even more. So I think India may be recognizing the true potential, but like I always think Indian cricket follows some Bollywood script. So बहुत दिन ऐसा तो नहीं जाता. There will be like one dip, and I think it'll always be like that in my book anyway.
Just adds to the mystery and excitement of it, Anand, what are your thoughts on the world order being reset?
No, I think for too long now we've been saying in India that this team has the potential to be number one, to stay on top, to dominate, to win in Australia, to win in England. For pretty much my entire journalism career, we've always been saying this team can win, but then they end up not really winning. You might win. Previously, you would win the odd test match. You would win one test match in a series, but never sustain through a 4-test series. So you could dominate the opposition and kind of be sure of victory. Previously, when you traveled to South Africa or England or Australia or New Zealand, if you won a test match, it was a bonus. It felt like a bonus. Like, oh, this is something cool we've done on this tour.
Yeah.
But now the expectation is different. The expectation is that India will win, whether they're playing home or away. And I think this has changed because from just talking about potential, now we are actually seeing performances. And as Bharat pointed out, basically half the team was wiped out by the end of that Australia series. And you were playing with guys who had really would not have dreamt of playing test cricket when they did, like Natarajan, for example. He would never have thought he would be playing a test for India in a few months down the road when he went set off to Australia even. So, yes, there is depth. Yes, we have lots. We have a large talent pool to choose from. But, you can't, at all times, you can't keep saying there's talent, there's potential, and then not delivering. But I think the big difference for me is that actual performances on the ground that has made opposition teams sit up and take notes.
So one last question to both of you. So there's potential and there's performance. And between those two, there can be, it's seldom an easy ride, correct? There are many chasms involved in it. There are many pressure situations involved in it. I, for one, am a big fan of the current, setup, the staff setup of the Indian team. How you guys have been close to the action. How has that switch been turned? In the dressing room, how's the atmosphere in the dressing room allowed that switch to be turned on?
I think for me, the answer is simple. They've just eliminated the fear of failure, it seems, at least by just the way these young guys just come in and play. Not just the young guys, but I have to say, Anand, I was slightly disappointed that I couldn't get to Brisbane. I still think with my action, I might have played ahead of T. Natarajan. But I think my chance has come and gone now, but thanks to COVID. But I think it's really that, Jatin, for me. The fear of failure, like I said, is gone. These guys just don't seem to, even after 36 all out. I mean, we talk about India having won this series, but sitting that day at the Adelaide Oval and that was still I still can't fathom how a team was bowled out for 36 all out or 36 for 9.
Yeah.
Every edge carried, there were no plays and misses, and for a team to then recover from that and to win the very next test match at the MCG after losing the toss, and then to draw the test at the SCG and then just win with some really random ragtag outfit at the Gabba and break that Gabba, the Gabba record. It's no longer the Gabba tour. I'm so glad. I hate that term. Yeah. It just tells you that they're not scared of anything. And like we heard from Ashwin on his show that Ravi Shastri said, well, 36 as a batch.
Yeah.
And that tone and I've heard a lot from a lot of that tone come through the ranks in the last 2 years. At least the last two tours I have covered, the one in New Zealand where you and I spent a lot of time, Jatin, and this one, and I'm sure it still continues. And I credit the team management and the coaching staff a lot, but also the senior players. I think now it's not just, initially I guess it was just coming down from Ravi Shastri, Bharat, Arun and co, but now we can see the likes of Ashwin and Rahane also really, and Pujara, own up to that responsibility of getting rid of that fear factor amongst the younger players. And I think India has benefited a lot from that. And that's why, like Anand said, they just seem to walk out on the field in any situation, in any condition, and back themselves to win. They've come back from behind so often in different formats now.
Yeah, true. Anand?
Yeah, I think initially the approach from Ravi Shastri and his support staff was to try and create a certain kind of environment in which players can do as they themselves love to say, in which they can express themselves. They wanted to set up an environment from which there would not be fear of being dropped. There would not be fear of playing without fear, essentially. I mean, to be able to say that,
basically, right? No insecurity.
Sorry. Exactly. And it's a very easy thing to say, but a very difficult environment to actually put together. Yeah. Especially when your team if results are not going your way, it's very difficult to kind of create that kind of atmosphere and spirit. So at some stages when India was not doing that well and Ravi Shastri was still saying this is the best team in the world, this is the best Indian team ever, and things like that, it struck us as, like, what is this man saying? He knows the game inside out. He's been involved in the game forever and a day. He's played against the best in the world. Why is he saying these things? And now it seems a little clearer, because it is not necessarily that he might have believed that India were the best team on that given day, but he wanted his players to believe that. He wanted his players to think that, to feel that, and take that kind of confidence with them onto the field, which is something they've done. So, all credit to them.
I must be honest, I lead a team of around 35, 37 people at Khelo More. And, these are tough times which we are all going through. And I literally sit down and I meditate pretty much daily. And I try to kind of take some lessons from, what would Ravi Shastri have done in this situation? What would Virat Kohli have done in this situation? What would an Ajinkya Rahane have done in this situation? And it really helps to calm yourself down and to think positively. And so I think there are a lot of life lessons to be taken from this tour. I hope you guys write more about that tour, because I think it was 10 years later, it will be seen in a very, very different light, because it will probably be seen as an inflection point onto a era of success for the Indians. But guys, thank you very much for joining me. Anand is going to be my partner in crime on this, as and when his schedule allows. Bharat, thank you very much at a short notice for agreeing to be here. And always a pleasure to chat with you. Hopefully we can catch up over a cold beverage sooner rather than later. So just thank you and take care of yourselves. Tough times for everybody, one day at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye.